Hello and welcome to another episode of the Northern Art Podcast with me, Ant Cosgrove. Hope you're all doing well. Recent exhibitions I've visited include the excellent Barbara Walker exhibition at the Whitworth Museum in Manchester. That's kind of finished now, but I believe it's moved down to Bristol. So it was a fantastic exhibition. I was at the launch event for two exhibitions that started at the same time at the Hetworth in Wakefield. First up was the Louise Jarvinelli show. Now, I followed Louise Jarvinelli's work for a number of years. She's a fantastic contemporary painter who's based in Manchester, exhibits now around the world really, and she's doing great things. So yeah, that was really cool to see that. Also, they've got a huge Surrealist exhibition on at the Hetworth, which was brilliant. It was celebrating the 100th year anniversary of Surrealism, and it included many of the greats, and it was an amazing show, and it had a fantastic night. I also went to see the Maurice Wade exhibition in Stoke, which is the biggest ever exhibition of his work. That was a terrific show. As recently as yesterday, I was in Oldham at the new Lights exhibition there. Pal of mine, Tony Heaton, has got a work in there, so I went to see that. Shout out to all the art nerds. And there's a Turner exhibition starting soon at the Whitworth in Manchester, so I shall be going to see that as well. Also, just to let you know, the interview today was recorded at the end of 2024. So let's get into it. My guests today are a couple who, thanks to their huge passion for modern British art, have undertaken the painstaking task of putting together a catalogue raisonné for the important 20th century landscape painter Sheila Fell. The catalogue is due out in 2025, and there is currently a major exhibition of Sheila's work at Tullie House in Carlisle. Sheila Fell is an artist whose work I love, so I thought it would be cool to learn more about her life and the processes involved in putting together this catalogue featuring all of her paintings. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guests today on the Northern Art Podcast, Eleanor and Andrew Bradley. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hello, Ant. Hi, we're doing good.
Yeah,
Yep,
you okay?
good.
You're based in Cambridge, is that right? Is that where you are?
Yeah, we're in Cambridge. We've been here about 25 years or something.
Have you? Right. And you're from you're both from a medical background, is that? Yeah.
I'm a scientist. I'm not medically qualified, but I worked in research for all my career. Did a PhD, and so yeah.
Right.
And I trained as a surgeon, and we both worked first of all in Glasgow for several years, and then we moved down to Cambridge in 1997.
Right. Okay.
Been here ever since. We retired from our academic posts several years ago now, didn't we?
Yes, 8 years, nearly 8 years ago.
Really?
Amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, you always find yourself plenty of things to keep yourself busy. That's what my parents have always said that to me, that they don't know how they ever found time to work, is what they sort of say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's good. So really, it's, I suppose, when did your interest in art start then? Was that something that sort of developed from a young age, or is it more of a recent thing, perhaps when you were working at the same time?
Yeah, I've always been interested in art. I remember as a student, I plastered my student rooms with paintings cut out from Sunday colour supplements. So I've always been interested and gone to lots of exhibitions. But I was never into modern British art. We sort of developed that interest more recently.
Right.
So probably over the last 15 years or so, we've sort of, or longer,
20.
20 years, been
20 years.
interested in modern British art.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's some of the artists involved, in the modern British period are some of the best artists that have ever come out of this country. In my opinion, it's a fascinating. I mean, I know Castlegate Gallery, which we'll probably touch on a bit later on. They sort of deal in a lot of modern British art, and I really do think it's an amazing period. The post-war sort of period of British art. I'm a massive fan of like Francis Bacon and Lucian Freud and Frank Auerbach and sort of some of the London school artists, as they were referred to. But yeah, it's a really interesting sort of topic, really. So how was it specifically with regards to Sheila Fell, who obviously we're going to be talking about today? When did that sort of start, your sort of interest in her?
Well, because of our age, we are of the post-war period, so that somehow resonates with our sort of what we like visually.
Yeah.
And we were interested in lots of 20th century British artists, but we're also interested in hill walking and mountains and the north particularly, and
Scotland,
particularly.
Yeah.
So I guess Sheila Fell, we just sort of came across her really. She wasn't a name that was as high profile as many others, so it was a bit of a journey of discovery for us.
So we'd been really interested in in the the Scottish School of Artists, and one in particular was Joan Eardley that we really loved.
Yes, you can see.
Yeah, fantastic. And she was, has a landscape paintings that are not pretty.
Yes,
landscape paintings. And when we came across Sheila Fell, there was a kind of similarity that she was painting her own area that she knew, but they weren't, attractive, picturesque chocolate box scenes. And that really resonated with us.
Yeah, that's exactly what I feel when I sort of see them. Very expressive sort of works, really, and they're quite emotional, but they're not, like you say, they're not chocolate box works at all, are they? Not what you sort of associate necessarily with the Lake District.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's sort of, obviously it's further north in the Lake District, sort of border country, isn't it, up there at the higher up into that area. But it's fascinating, and I think that it'd be good now to sort of talk about Sheila, because you obviously have done this publication, which is brilliant, and we can obviously talk about it later on. There isn't actually that much published about her, unfortunately. There should be more. There's not like tons and tons of books, really, is there? There was a book that came out a few years ago. Is it a Passion for Paint by Kate Haste? And that book, I think it must be out of print now, because you can't buy copies of it. You struggle to get. I'm assuming you probably got a copy, or at least a couple of copies. But and there's mine there, by the way.
Very good.
But hang on to it. It's worth a lot of money now.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because the cheapest copy, I went on last night just to have a look. The cheapest copy I could see on Amazon was £175 for that book.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's out of print. So Kate Haste published that book in 2010, and that when it was published was the first book essentially on the artist. So it was a very major milestone in Sheila Fell. I mean, she was a very famous artist in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s. As you know, she was an RA member, fellow of the Royal Academy, and she was really at the very forefront, on a par with Leon Kossoff and Frank Auerbach in the 60s. And, sadly, as pop art took a hold in the mid to late 60s, landscape painting was sort of considered very passé. No one, it was very old-fashioned, the avant-garde would have us believe. And it was only in the 70s when that sort of figurative and landscape art came back into fashion. Unfortunately, Sheila Fell died in 1979 when she was 48. So she never lived to see that revival in the sort of genre that she was into.
Yeah, no, it's we'll talk a bit about her life now, and we'll sort of go through it. I've made some, I've read the book a couple of times, the Kate one, and there is, and we'll run through it. I mean, she was born on the 20th of July, 1931, in a small terraced cottage on Queen Street in Espatria. That's a small town, isn't it, really? Sort of, it's got a population of about 3,000. And it's in Cumberland, which is kind of, it's high area of Cumbria, really. And this was a town that sort of worked off the land, really, more than anything else. And that obviously did definitely feed into Sheila's art. Can you talk about her early life? Do you know much about sort of what she was like as a child?
Yeah, we can tell you. So first of all, if you think about Espatria, it is as you said, she always referred to it as a village. It is, in fact, as you say, a small town. It's about 5 or 6 miles from the Solway coast.
That's right.
And it's only about 300 foot high. So it's not it's not in any sense a high, hilly or mountainous place. You can see in the very far distance, several miles away, the back of Skiddaw on the skyline. So, she was aware of the presence of those high fells, but she was several miles away from them. And Espatria really was a small agricultural village. And then with the discovery of the coal seams, it became a coal mining town. And then it sort of really prospered at the end of the 18th century. But by the time Sheila Fell was born in 1931, the town the mines were closing or had closed, and there was a massive decline. It was a very tough place then to live. There was a lot of unemployment. But she essentially grew up in this setting, and I guess she had really a rural upbringing, although it was a coal mining town. She was, there were farms all around her. So she was, as a child, very much part of that. Her family were relatively poor, but so were many of the other residents of Espatria. Yeah. And she was born in the front bedroom of the house you mentioned. She was an only child, quite late in life to her mother. Her father was a coal miner, and her mother was trained as a seamstress. And her mother didn't have a sort of 9 to 5 job when Sheila was young, but she did a lot of work doing sewing to bring in extra money to try and support their daughter. So she had a very loving upbringing, didn't she, Ellen?
Yeah, she was a cherished child. She wanted for nothing, really.
Right.
Given, her parents just provided for her as much as they could. And she was a bright and inquisitive child. She was an only child, so, she took her entertainment, and she was fairly self-contained, I think, but she was very close to her mother, and she would go out with her mother, and they would go for walks in the countryside and stuff.
And then when she was 11, one of her mother's brothers, who was relatively wealthy in those terms, paid for Sheila to go to the grammar school in Wigton.
Oh, right.
Tomlinson Girls' Grammar School, which, as you probably know, was a very good school then. And
very good school, yeah.
And there she flourished, travelled by bus every day from Espatria, and she excelled in languages, in music, and in art. And it was a bit of a... She wasn't really sure she wanted to be an artist when she was a school girl, but she had an art teacher called Catherine Rook who persuaded her that she should pursue art. And when she was 17, she went to study at what was then Carlisle School of Art, based in Tullie House.
Tullie House, yeah.
And she didn't particularly like it. She felt that the other students in the big town of Carlisle rather looked down on this small girl from a little town of Espatria. And
plus, she didn't like the way she was being steered towards a career in the textiles industry. So Carlisle was very big for textiles, and that was what women did. They worked in the textile factories doing design and stuff for that sort of thing. So she regarded that as quite a narrow opportunity for her, and she wasn't interested in that at all.
So when she was 19, she headed off to London, again with the encouragement of Catherine Rook, her art teacher from school. And she spent 3 years studying at St Martin's School of Art in Charing Cross Road, right next to Soho, which we could talk about became a significant part of her life. And she absolutely flourished in London. She was mixing with ex-servicemen, people of all classes, working class, middle class, upper class. It was really a very free and stimulating environment in that post-war period.
She never went back then, did she? She never lived back, did she? Obviously, she went back, but she didn't. There
was never any going back. She went back just to sort of refresh her memory for the images that she used, but she could never have gone back to live in Espatria after discovering London. Yeah. And she became part of a bohemian set of artists and playwrights and authors, poets in London, and essentially flourished. And it was only when she was in London that she realized that Espatria and Cumberland had to be her subject. It was almost like she hung on to those childhood memories, and that was her lifeline to this sort of cherished childhood and adolescence that she had. And that, she discovered, became her sole subject, very successquely, obviously. Yeah.
She could have gone into becoming a musician as well. Did she play the piano as well? I think to quite a high level. I think she was quite good at the piano as well, from what I gathered.
I think she was good at music, yeah, and she enjoyed it. I don't think she ever considered it seriously.
Right.
So she quite liked ballet as well.
Right.
She liked ballet as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like you say, she went to London and she, she spent time. She was there. That was like she was in London from 1949 to 1951. The teachers there were Roland Vivian Pitchforth and John Napper, who were war artists, I think. Obviously the people that she was mixing with when she was at St Martin's, in particular, these various people of note, but Leon Kossoff was obviously there. And definitely Frank Auerbach was one that sort of is a name that gets mentioned quite a lot with regards to Sheila Fell.
Yeah, and they were quite close friends at that time. They sort of worked alongside each other. And I think it was Auerbach who probably introduced her to Bomberg's night classes at Borough Polytechnic, which was a big feature for Auerbach and Kossoff. They learned how to do charcoal drawings, and Bomberg at that time was considered a bit of a maverick by all the formal art schools. His teaching methods, he taught them to sort of feel things, to draw from deep within inside them, not to sort of religiously copy everything that they saw, but to capture what he termed the spirit of the mass. And certainly back in Kosovo, that was very important.
It was.
In
That's
their
interesting. I didn't know Sheila was. Did Sheila ever go to any of the classes then?
She went to at least one. I don't think it was actually considered slightly. It was discouraged by the art school. So they did this really knowing that it was something she shouldn't really be doing. And I don't know if it was that or whether she just didn't enjoy Bomberg's methodology.
Yeah. There were a few women artists who went. I think Dorothy Mead, was one of the artists that was there, and there was possibly
yes, that's right.
Yeah, there was a couple of us. Got like Miles Richmond and people like that involved. With the borough group. But yeah, that's quite an interesting period as well. Right, I didn't realise that she. Yeah, I suppose that would make sense if she knew Auerbach. She was obviously going to hear about it at the very least.
Yeah,
with regards to that. So that's fascinating.
That Bomberg connection probably had she was very productive doing large charcoal drawings, very expressive large charcoal drawings in the mid and late 50s. And you can see the influence, I think, anyway, of Bomberg in many of those.
Right.
Huge, dark, expressive charcoal. And many of the critics, and particularly her gallerist, Helen Lesaur, thought those charcoal drawings were some of the most beautiful things she ever did.
Right.
So there hasn't been much of an opportunity to see them since the sort of 60s, really. They haven't been in exhibitions very much, and there aren't many in Kate Hast's book.
No.
So the show at Tullie at the moment has a lot of a good representation of charcoals, and they're really impressive. It's fantastic to see them all together.
Yeah, no, I do.
Really
I like
big,
charcoal.
powerful pictures. Yeah,
I've got one there. I've got a John Virtue behind me, which is a portrait of charcoal ones, and that's obviously that's a portrait actually. Usually does a lot of landscapes and stuff. But when she was in London, she got a grant, didn't she? Is that right? She had a grant from the.
She had a small grant from the local education authority in Cumberland, and her parents helped support her. They sent her food parcels down, but she wasn't a starving waif. I mean, she was no different in that respect from many of the other people at art school. So that she struggled.
But they all did.
They spent money on paint and canvases and going out clubbing and drinking.
Yeah, she worked. She had a couple of jobs, didn't she, as well at that time as well? Is it true that she worked at the French House? Did she work there in London? I think
yes. Well, I'm not sure about the French.
That's what house. I heard it from Chris Wadsworth. I don't know if that was true or not.
Yeah, she certainly worked. She sold postcards at National Gallery. She worked in bars. She did odd jobs. Mainly after the first 2 years at art school, she wanted to stay on for a further year to do a year of painting after she got her diploma. So she worked part-time to support that additional year. And that's when she started to do her early oil paintings. And then she became friendly with one of the major critics.
Yeah, David Sylvester, who was an art critic of the time.
Oh.
He discussed it with John Berger about art and so on. They had great discussions. So he was quite a renowned critic, and he came across Sheila Fell at a party held by the Moynahans, who he was president. I think was
Rodrigo Moynihan,
right. And Eleanor Bellingham Smith, his wife, and he met her there, and they sort of got chatting and so on, and he found out that she was an artist, and he was quite interested in her. And quite interested in her art, I think. So he tried to find out more about her art, and she showed him some paintings, and he thought he was very impressed. So he knew Helen Lesaur, who had the Beaux-Arts Gallery, and said to Helen Lesaur that she should hold an exhibition for Sheila Fell. And David Sylvester arranged with Helen Lesaur to take some of Sheila Fell's paintings to show her.
Right.
So, and that was the beginning of Sheila's kind of professional career.
She had her first solo exhibition at Beaux-Arts in December 1955, and she was one of the youngest solo exhibitionists because it was a very important gallery, as I'm sure you
It
know.
was, yeah. Well, she was only like about 20, mid 24 or something
24,
like that, wasn't she?
24, yeah.
Yeah. Which was the opportunities for a young artist, relatively new out of art school in the 50s, were almost non-existent. So it was a huge achievement for her to have this solo exhibition in Mayfair.
Yeah.
And she never looked back after that. Actually, she was given another 4 exhibitions at the Beaux-Arts Gallery,
right.
and she was given, good reviews by all the major critics of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that gallery is such a, like you say, it's an important gallery. I mean, obviously, I thought the connection might be from Frank Auerbach, because, of course, he showed there as well, didn't he, at the Beaux-Arts?
Yeah,
but maybe
but not
he showed
later.
Was it till later?
Yeah, he was slightly later, but he did. And in fact, he became one of the most showed artists of the gallery.
Yeah.
Sheila Fell was the third most, had the third most exhibitions after Frank Auerbach,
right,
and another artist.
It's nice when you see pictures with the Beaux-Arts, the gallery label on the back, that's quite a nice thing to sort of see. So I do quite like seeing that. But yeah, like you say, prior to that, I think she'd been in a couple of exhibitions of something called Young Contemporaries or something in the early 50s.
Yeah, so this was a thing that all the art students were encouraged to put a painting or two into, and she showed twice in 2 years, I think 54 and 55 at the Young Contemporaries exhibition. There was an exhibition where they had literally several hundred paintings. It was a massive thing done because there was little opportunity for young artists to show. So that was an important, and it had only started a couple of years earlier. So it was a new thing.
And then, so like you say, the Helen the Saw Gallery is iconic. It's so well known, the Beaux-Arts Gallery. But then something happened, didn't it, at the exhibition? A gentleman sort of walked into the exhibition and saw some of Sheila Fell's paintings. So I'll let you take up the story from that, and you can talk about that guy.
Yeah. So a very elderly artist arrived at the exhibition in 1955 and bought a couple of paintings and a drawing. He liked what he saw. Sheila Fell wasn't actually at the gallery at that time, but the artist concerned was L.S. Lowry, and he asked Helen Lasalle whether he could meet with her, and she arranged for him to meet Sheila Fell early the following year, and they met up in Tottenham Court Road, and they went off to a Greek restaurant and had lunch, and over lunch, Lowry explained that he liked her work and that he wanted, with her parents' permission, to support her financially for a couple of years with a regular small amount of money. And Sheila Fell agreed. Lowry did meet with her parents. Their parents were in favour of this. And from that time on, Lowry and Fell became extremely good friends. He was a great supporter. He bought quite a lot of her work over the years, supported her. And actually, I think as a role model, he'd struggled for so many years. He was regarded as a Sunday painter. He wasn't taken seriously by the art establishment until quite late on. And I think she recognized in that, that it was a good lesson for her. And she took great support from Lowry's experience and stuck with her own specific style. She wasn't deflected by all the sort of modern happenings in the art world. She sort of stuck with what she knew. Do you agree, Alan?
Yeah, definitely.
I think with Lowry as well, he would have definitely sort of, although she was obviously on that pathway herself, he would have definitely encouraged the fact to paint what you know, which is something that obviously Lowry sort of greatly did in his own work. And so she would have, when she was painting, coming back to Cumberland and painting, he would have been, yes, that's the right thing to do. Don't get distracted from doing that. And these stories about him traveling up, to spend time with her on painting trips and things like that. And I think he met the parents and things. That sort of sounds right, and became quite friendly with those as well.
Yeah. He became very friendly. They really enjoyed his visits. I mean, it was kind of hard work because he was quite demanding.
Right.
And they did things like they installed a bathroom in the house from having an outside toilet. They then decided that having an important visitor like Lowry, they needed to have an indoor bathroom, so they did that. But he used to come up regularly and got on very well with Sheila Fell's father.
Right.
So he was a very sort of gentle, friendly person, and he was into his racing pigeons, so he would show Lowry his pigeons, and they just got on really well, and Lowry enjoyed his visits and the family enjoyed them.
Yeah.
And then during the daytime he would go out painting with Sheila, and he would take her to places that she wasn't so interested in. So he knew a chap called the Reverend Bennett, Geoffrey Bennett, who was a bank manager in Maryport, which was a town not that far away, 8 miles away on the coast.
Yeah.
He encouraged Sheila Fell to go to Maryport because Lowry knew it quite well, having been to see Bennett there.
Yeah.
So Sheila knew it, but she just wasn't interested in the, in the city, in the town, not a city. But she went with Lowry, and Lowry did a bit of sketching of the kind of urban scenes, and Sheila went up and painted the views of Maryport from a place called the Settlement. So this was a place that was known well by another local artist called Percy Kelly, who you'll know of. And Maryport was a favourite place of Percy Kelly's for painting for some years. He did loads of paintings
and lived there for several years.
Yeah, he lived there as well. And his favourite place was up on a place called the Settlement, which gave a high up view of the harbour.
Yeah, you see the red church, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, the Sailors' Church, and Sheila Fell painted several large canvases showing Maryport, one of which the Tate eventually bought, and the others are in private collections. But they're very impressive panoramic paintings of almost like a harbour or a townscape, quite distinct from much of her other work.
Yeah, they're much more representational than her
I agree.
landscapes.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, she's trying to get everything in the right place, isn't she? In the right order in the work.
Yeah, but she does have her own, stamp on the painting there. Like in the distance, she would make the presence of the mountain in Dumfries, Mount Criffel.
Okay.
So she would make that more prominent than it actually is. And
right.
This was sort of in the 60s, when she started painting in the mid and late 50s. She painted these often on vertical canvases, these sort of incredibly dark mountains which extended all the way up to the top of the canvas, and you could hardly see what was going on. There was a lake, maybe Buttermere, for example. There's a painting of Buttermere, but you can hardly tell. It's just a sort of navy blue bit of water and a huge dark landscape. And Lowry told her that he'd done a study and showed that with time, paintings tend to darken, so she should lighten her colours a little bit. Not a lot, but just enough to offset this, what he regarded as a slow darkening with time. And she did take that advice on board, and she did tend to lighten her palette in the late 50s.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, Lowry, of course, the thing is with him as well, just to sort of finally say on him, apparently, did he travel up? He got taxis, didn't he, to see them? He actually, because he didn't drive, did he? So he came up to, it's crazy. You can't even imagine that now, can you? Getting a taxi.
No, neither he nor Sheila Fell ever drove. So Lowry would think nothing of going up by taxi. And then the two of them would hire a taxi from Spatria to take them on trips around within the area. Or occasionally farmers would come and help take them around, mainly Sheila Fell rather than Lowry.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little anecdote, isn't there? Apparently, that they were painting in at the same time, side by side, and at the end of the day, they sort of compared paintings. And the one that Lowry had been painting, he hadn't been painting the scene at all. He'd been painting sort of an imagined landscape, if you like, from memory and whatever. And then Sheila obviously had been painting a landscape. So that's sort of, I've heard that story about 100 times, but it's quite a nice little anecdote, really. But yeah, it's he was obviously, it was a very famous artist, at the time, obviously, that Sheila would have known him. And so, it was the interesting thing as well, just to briefly touch on it, is Lowry, of course, painted a figure that so many people have talked about, this particular subject of Lowry's, whether she existed, whether it was from his imagination or an amalgamation of different people. And that was Anne. I think I might be right in saying that the first picture of Anne or one of the earlier ones was about 1957. So if he met Sheila in about 1955, and Sheila, of course, having she kind of looks a bit like Anne, doesn't she? And,
Yeah.
certainly with the sort of heavy eyeliner and the sort of, I don't know, because Sheila was a striking lady, wasn't she, by all accounts?
Yeah. Long dark hair.
Dark hair, and so some people say she does look a bit like Anne. And then, of course, there's obviously further things, isn't it? Because Sheila's mum was it Anna? I think it was. She
was called Anne.
Yeah, she was called Anne as well. And then Sheila's daughter ended up being Anna, I think it was. I think was the daughter's name.
Anna, yeah.
Anna. So there's there's a lot of connections going on there with all this sort of Anna sort of thing with regards to Sheila Fell. But who knows?
Yeah.
Thing, and people sort of will debate about it for years to come as to who it might have been, but yeah, I mean, he said it was somebody from Leeds or something, or some daughter of somebody that he knew from Leeds, but he said different things to different people. That's the thing.
Well, Lowry compartmentalized his life, and Absolutely. A lot of his friends didn't know, and Sheila Fell did the same. So she knew Lowry didn't drink or smoke, and she kept her Soho lifestyle very separate, and tried not to let Lowry find out about her her social life, basically.
Yeah, she did have a child, didn't she? Like I said, in 1958, and I think the father was a sculptor. Is that right? Is that?
Yes, he's a Greek born sculptor called Takis, who became a very eminent sculptor based in Paris and working in New York.
Right.
And in fact, recently had a solo exhibition. A couple of years ago at the Tate, and then recently one in Paris. So
right.
He's dead now, of course, but his work's still very highly rated internationally.
And then, of course, around that time, she joined the teaching staff, didn't she? I think as well, the Chelsea.
Chelsea,
which is probably, if anything, that gives you a bit more of a stability with regards to a regular income as well, and that sort of helped, as many artists have done over the course of time. Teaching is sort of something that they've done. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how long she was there for.
She was there essentially the remainder of her life. Actually, she teaching occasionally 2 days a week, and she met, for example, Craig Aitchison, who also taught at Chelsea, and they became very good friends. She became very friendly with Ewan Uglow, Miles Murphy. So she was part of
Prunella Clough.
Prunella Clough taught at Chelsea School of Art. Yeah,
right,
so
okay.
She became friendly with her.
And obviously we've discussed it, but the fact that what she did was her paintings were always based on the area that she knew, which is obviously in Cumberland, and it was quite majority of them are. I think there are possibly some Welsh ones, and I think there might be some Scottish ones as well. But I think by and large, they all in that sort of that 20-mile radius. I think a lot of her work, aren't they? Is that right?
Or even closer? Yeah. It's important though to point out that many of the paintings weren't strictly representational. So she would paint a farmhouse, for example, and then she'd just put in the background whatever she felt was necessary. It might be a hill or it might not be a hill. She'd move houses around. So that, she created what she thought caught the essence of the place, rather than a strictly accurate representation of what was there.
And it wasn't just the scenery that she was painting. She was painting the physicality of the landscape. She was getting at the people who worked there, what a hard life they had, the harsh weather conditions and the harsh landscape and the actual physical work of scratching a living from the land. So she was very interested in potato harvesting and planting and the kind of ways that people move their bodies. So she liked Van Gogh, and when some of her paintings have got Van Gogh-like figures in them, moving and bending down and planting potatoes and harvesting, and but there was always the kind of harshness of the landscape and the man's struggle for existence.
That's right. I think the colours as well. There's a lot of. She was quite interested in tone, wasn't she? More than sort of they weren't bright colours or anything like that. Sort of they're they're quite subdued. The colours, certainly more like perhaps early Van Gogh and Cézanne and people like that. Rather than sort of that she wasn't really going in for colour.
There was a period in the mid-60s when she had money and she suddenly started painting wheat harvest and harvesting scenes in the middle of the summer, and they're just like an explosion of oranges and yellows and reds, quite different. And that it only lasted for a few months. and then she
Yeah,
reverted back to her darker colours.
there's maybe a dozen fantastic brightly coloured paintings that just looks completely mad in the rest of her kind of repertoire.
And she herself said she got carried away with colour, and she's just
they're
big.
very striking.
Yeah, heavily.
Sadly, there aren't any at Tullie. Sadly. But...
Oh right, okay, right. So, what I can say about sort of Sheila's work with regards to her working process, from my sort of understanding, is that obviously when she was in London, and she was a student, and then obviously when she went on to teach, she was always traveling back to Aspatria and to Cumberland, and she was painting and drawing and taking inspiration from her surroundings, and then she would use that information either as studies, whether they were small paintings or they were drawings, and then she would go back to her studio in London, and then she would compose these bigger paintings in the studio. I think she was termed as saying something like she would take them back to the studio and she would mess them up or something like that, some quote like that she said. Now I don't know whether or not she did perhaps make some of her paintings on the spot in Cumberland, and then she took back partly finished works and finished them off in the studio, or whether there was a bit of a mixture. I'd imagine there was probably various ways that she worked, but sort of is that sort of the gist of how is that what you think of her process?
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary. She did finish some paintings, particularly small ones, on site, but most were taken back to her studio in London. She did a very well-known painting of Skiddaw, which is in the exhibition, and it's often reproduced. And as far as we can understand, she completed that entirely in front of a subject in Cumbria. But most, I think, were completed in London, often from postcards, drawings, small paintings.
Yeah, and I think it was obviously such an inspiration to her that even like in 1959 she got a travelling scholarship, I believe, and she went to Italy, to France, to Greece, to Switzerland. But I don't think it was a great success because she couldn't feel anything for the place that she was visiting. She didn't get the same sort of emotion that she was getting from the landscape that she obviously knew and she grew up around.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. She found the landscape quite harsh. The light was very bright, and she couldn't. It didn't kind of tone with how she was feeling. But she did make some small drawings. And they tended to be ones that, had a kind of vague similarity to Cumbria, but were like in Greece, she did with cypress trees and hillsides and things. But she didn't do oil paintings of them.
And all that with regards to her career and everything. I think it was 1957 she entered the John Moores Prize, and I think she came second. Is that right? In the junior section.
Yeah, she was second. So John Bradley got the first prize,
right?
and she came second. And interesting, actually, because in a sense her career has eclipsed, in our view anyway, John Bradley. I mean, I think she's now seen as a probably a more serious artist, a more durable artist than he was. Yeah. But that's probably a personal view. But anyway,
yes, obviously kitchen sink school realism that he was sort of painting. It's a good film, actually. Have you ever seen The Horse's Mouth? That's quite a good film.
No.
You can I think you can actually get it on YouTube. I think it's a black and white film. I think it's Alec Guinness, and the painting. I'll maybe send you the link. The paintings that were used in that film were all John Bradley paintings, like props, if you like, for because it was the film it's kind of it's a funny film basically. It's comedy, but like maybe a little bit dark comedy, but it's good. And yeah, there's a lot of John Bradley paintings in that. I think it was Jeffrey Key who told me about that. But anyway, to name drop there. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that was, one of the things that was a great success in her life really was the to do with becoming a Royal Academician. I mean, she was made an associate in 1969, and then she was made a full Royal Academician sort of 5 years later in 1974. And I think that was something possibly to do with Lowry, and sort of he sort of, because obviously he was a member, and maybe he put her forward for that.
Yeah, he certainly was. I mean, it's done by a series of votes, and he was one of the voters. But and I think it was. I mean, she was a bit initially when she was approached to stand to be an associate. I think she was slightly hesitant because many of her colleagues felt the Royal Academy was slightly establishment and not where young artists should be going. And Sheila's mother, who took a very keen interest in her career, absolutely said there is no doubt. You've got to, if you're asked, you join the academy and make good use of it. So she took her mother's advice on that.
Yeah, I mean, she was she was quite young then, really. When she became
young.
She was 42 when she became a full academician.
Well, there you go.
Which was very young, and she was only one of 3 women at the time. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So young and attractive in this institution of. I think
it did. I think it probably helped her career in some ways.
Yes.
She was a fantastic artist, but I don't think it did her any harm, in that sort of sense. I think a lot of, I know Chris Wadsworth said that everybody who met her fell in love with her, I think, or something like that. So, I'd imagine that sort of, maybe there was elements of that as well.
It enabled her to put 6 paintings in the summer exhibition every year, and they usually sold pretty well, and then she'd get commissions on the back of those.
Of course, yeah.
They'd sell outside. It was a good source of income for her.
And stability.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's tragic how she died not long enough after, really. But if you're a Royal Academician, you get various honours to do with that. I mean, she could have gone on and she could have put on the summer show and been involved in that and all the things that could have happened afterwards. So she died. Lowry, first of all, I think died in 1976, didn't it? And I think her father died not long after that. So that would have been.
They both died. Yeah, it was 76 was a very
6 weeks or something.
Tragic year for her. Her father and Lowry both died, and I think she felt that. And also, her mother was becoming very elderly at that stage.
Right.
And as Patria was changing, farming ways were changing. So I think, in a sense, that the thing that she loved about Patria, the horses, the carts being drawn along by horses, people working the potato fields, all that was coming or had come to an end. Having said that, latterly, in the last few years of her career, she discovered a place called Greenhowie, which is in North Yorkshire, near Pateley Bridge, very high on the moors. It's about 1,300 foot up. And she did a lot of paintings in that area. It's an old lead mining area, and she just sort of seemed to sort of engage with this and fell in love with the area and created a whole sort of number of works of abandoned houses and cottages in Greenhow.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
No.
And then she died. It was in 79, wasn't it? She died. And from what I've heard, it was alcohol poisoning, and then she tumbled down some stairs. It was quite a sort of steep sort of route. It was quite up some stairs, wasn't it? Her studio where she lived.
It was on the top 2 floors of a house. Yeah, I think she was. I mean, it was basically acute alcohol poisoning. I think she'd found. I mean, she did drink heavily intermittently in the last few years. I think she found painting a more lonely thing, a pursuit. Her father and Lowry had both died. She was having issues, I think, with one of her boyfriends. And I think she also had a major London exhibition, the first for 15 years, at the New Grafton Gallery in London, in Mayfair.
Right.
And that she died while that was on. And I think she'd found the whole business of having to create everything for that exhibition very stressful. Very tragic.
I mean, there's obviously so much written about her, and that's especially now with the exhibition coming on and everything. But there was an article literally published, wasn't there, the day after she died, in which she'd been interviewed maybe a week or so before she died, and she said that she wanted to live until she was 104 and all the rest of it, and she had so many she wanted to do poetry, I think, as well, and things like that. And tragically, she died, and then the article had come out like a day after or something like that. Which is very sad.
That was interview with Hunter Davis in the Sunday Times.
Right, okay. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Right, so yes, that's the end of that sort of story of Sheila's life, really, and whatnot. But we'll talk about now the you guys and what you've managed to achieve. So how did the idea to do this catalogue raisonné develop? Where did that sort of the idea for that sort of start from, really?
His idea.
So when we retired about 7 years ago now, and we were 8 years, very busy academics, and we wanted something that had an academic element to it. And we were so in love with art, we thought Sheila Fell. We were surprised actually how little had been written about Sheila Fell, and she just seemed someone who was very worthy of having a catalogue raisonné. So we set out to do that. I think we were very naive in what we thought was going to be involved. It's been a massive full-time project.
When did you start it? What year was it
years.
you started it then? When was it? How long did it take?
Oh, we were thinking about it at the time we retired.
Right.
And it took us probably a couple of years before we actually started finding where the paintings were that we could go and photograph them. So initially we thought about a book on Sheila Fell, but we knew we didn't have the kind of artistic language for writing an academic work. So we decided that the catalogue raisonné fitted the bill, because we were used to that kind of academic rigor and recording and accuracy and so on. So that seemed to be a very good idea. So that meant that we had to somehow find out where all Sheila Fell's paintings were held, and actually go and look at them and photograph them for the book, and find out all the details about them.
So we travelled very extensively.
I was going to say, I bet you travelled all over, didn't you?
From Skye in Scotland across to the top of the east coast of Scotland, down to the southwest.
Yeah, down to Devon.
Lots in London, lots in Cumbria.
Yeah.
Newcastle, Yorkshire. Yeah, they're
White.
everywhere.
Was there any abroad then? Was there any overseas?
Yeah, there are several in America. There are some in Europe, and probably some in Europe that we don't know about, actually, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, if it was me, what would be the sort of the natural process? And I guess in the first instance, you'd look at what's held in the public collection. So a great resource is something like Art UK as a beginning.
Yes. That was really helpful.
Kate Haste was, she's obviously died, unfortunately, but she helped us a great deal in making a start. She had various contacts, and we put adverts in the Royal Academy. We put adverts in Country Life, for example, and we advertised, and word got around.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, isn't it? Sort of, it's word, and obviously, the Art UK, like I mentioned, Art UK public collections, and then getting the word out to the general public. But you've got things like auction houses. You might have records of what you sold. And then the art galleries themselves, and some of them obviously have closed down now, so it's probably trying to find their records or old. Did you go through like old exhibition catalogues, for example?
We've been through Sotheby's, Bonhams, Christie's, Mitchell's in Cockermouth. We've been through all their old auction catalogues. Right. And Chris Wadsworth, who was previously under Castlegate Gallery House, Castlegate House Gallery in Cockermouth, was incredibly helpful, and as have Christine and Steve Swallow, who took over the running of the gallery from Chris. So they've been key, actually.
And also Bill Clark in Hale.
Clark in Hale.
So they were really helpful, all of them.
Yeah, because they'll obviously have the history of who they've sold paintings to. And one thing that was interesting me is, have you come across paintings described somewhere or even imaged somewhere that you've not actually physically been able to track down? Like something from an old catalogue, and then it's called such and you couldn't actually link it up to an actual.
There are some. So Sheila Fell had a collection of photographs of her paintings, and some of those don't have a title, so we've no idea, really, not a very good idea anyway, of what the title of that painting was, where it was exhibited. So, which is very frustrating. I think that's pretty true with nearly every catalogue raisonné. There's always going to be things you don't discover. New information will come to light just as we publish it, I'm sure, which will be very frustrating, but it's just inevitable, really.
Yeah. How many did you discover then? How many paintings is there in the catalogue, approximately?
470.
Right. Wow. Right. Okay.
Those are oil paintings on canvas or board, nearly all on canvas, in fact, but we didn't include works on paper, although there's a chapter in the book on works on paper, quite a big chapter. So we do have lots of illustrations of drawings, but it's not a comprehensive an attempt at tracking. I mean, it would just, the drawings often aren't treated with the same care as paintings, and people don't realize what they are. And so it would be a very difficult task to actually catalogue drawings, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that there was a Leon Kossoff catalogue raisonné that came out a couple of years ago. And obviously the benefit of that was the fact he was alive during much of the sort of, when that was being produced. But that, yeah, again, it just concentrated on the oil paintings, which is sort of what a lot of them do. Because I suppose another aspect with doing it, I think that was Andrea Rose who wrote that, by the way. Another thing with doing the
Yeah.
catalogue is it kind of makes things official, because even now I've noticed at least one, maybe two, maybe more fake Sheila Fells coming up at auction. And so,
Yeah.
it's kind of a bit frightening when you think of it. Whereas now, obviously, with you guys, sort of heading up this new publication, that's kind of an official documentation of what is right from the very beginning. And then I guess anything above that, like you said, other ones will appear, whether there is some sort of digital record that you just add it to and give whoever's submitting this work an official number or however you handle it for the future. But at least it gives it some sort of, it's the provenance, isn't it? It's all about giving it that sort of cemented provenance. I mean, obviously we've all watched Fake or Fortune, and and so they go to the Wilderstein Institute or whatever they're called, and these are the ones who are the official sort of representatives of estates and things. But it does sort of, and then they have to make sure it can pass that and it can be officiated. But I think it's a brilliant exercise, and it's well worth doing. And of course, with Sheila, she died extremely young, so there is only an amount of oils, isn't there? It's not like, for example, Lowry would be a much harder undertaking because there'd be quite a few thousand. Although I've heard rumours that might be something that somebody's doing at the moment. But that would be there'd be more, basically.
It was quite interesting that the work that she produced was fairly restricted to exhibitions at galleries like the Stone Gallery or the Beaux-Arts Gallery.
Yeah.
And the summer Royal Academy shows.
Yeah.
So that we've got the exhibition catalogues and we know how many were in each one. And we haven't come across a lot of paintings that were not either exhibited in a gallery or in the Royal Academy. So we don't think there are a lot of paintings that she just had in her studio that were for, they could have been commissions or for friends. There will be some.
Yeah. That's it.
And some undoubtedly will turn up.
Yeah.
We never wanted to find ourselves in the position of having to authenticate things, actually.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we've only come across a handful of paintings we had serious doubts about. And I think all the owners also bought them knowing that they probably weren't necessarily Sheila Fell paintings. So that hasn't been a major problem for us, fortunately, because it can become very complicated.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, it's quite emotional, isn't it, as well? This is the thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess do auction well, you probably had dealings with auction houses then, maybe asking you to authenticate works. And I suppose if it's not something you necessarily want to do,
we're happy to. I mean, we're happy to give a view, particularly for auction houses, and it's not so much authentication. I think they're more interested in provenance and any aspects that help, bring the work to life. Really, any interesting history or
well, hopefully, there isn't fakes that appear. But, I've just noticed a couple. I mean, Lowry's an absolute minefield for the fakes, that sort of market. So, and like you were talking about the drawings of Sheila Fell and whatnot, but the Lowry drawing market is just hideous, just awash with fakes. But I think, like I say, I think somebody is doing an oil one. I think I heard that a while ago, but whether it is going to come into fruition, I'm not 100% sure. But it's a brilliant thing anyway, what you've done. And I know it's published by Lund Humphreys, I think. Is it coming out? It's next year, isn't it? It's coming out, is it?
It's coming out in June of next year, yeah.
Right, June. That's good. Very, very good. I'll ask you one more thing, and then we'll quickly talk about the exhibition. What's your favourite Sheila Fell painting?
Probably the one we haven't seen. It's really a hard question. We love snowscapes, and she painted a lot of snowscapes. She loved the effect that snow had on the landscape. So there's also a wheat harvest scene which is at the exhibition, which we like very much. But so many, I mean, her paintings, I think one of the reasons there have been so few fakes is her paintings are very complex. She actually mixed the colors on the brush. And I think it's quite hard to actually reproduce that effect unless you're a really good artist.
That's one of the most striking things about her work is her ability to use oil paint to good effect. And whether it's a snow scene or a seascape or a potato harvest, she just managed to mix colours that were perfect for the purpose, but not overmixed. So you can always see the component colours, which is really interesting. And she used flashes of colours to highlight different areas. Really good.
It's great. I mean, I've not seen probably that many in the flesh. I've seen quite a number, but I know this exhibition that's on at Tullie House at the moment. You guys have been involved in that, haven't you? Did you create that or something? Is that right?
Yeah, and we have seen a lot of nearly all the works in there. There are works from the Tate, from the Royal Academy, from the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool, but a lot of them are from private collections that we came across. And Sheila Fell's paintings are quite dark, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
And we were sort of thinking, gosh, what will they be like when you get, nearly 100 of them in a gallery?
Yeah.
And we were blown away when we saw it. It's actually astonishing. They're beautifully lit, and they sort of bounce off each other. And so we were taken completely by it. We're very familiar with these paintings. We've seen them, photographed them, but seeing them all in the same gallery, lit and well hung, was a revelation for us, actually.
Well done.
And another thing about them is they're not kind of samey. That she does have, her style changed throughout the years.
Yeah.
And you can see the progression of her work there.
Yeah. You won't obviously always appreciate that until you do see a body of them together and
that's
see
right.
the differences.
Yeah.
And this is the largest exhibition, isn't it? Is it ever, or is it
It's the largest ever, yeah.
Wow.
There was a large travelling exhibition which was held at the Royal Academy in 1990, and that travelled around the country, went to several venues around the UK, and that was large. But this one's got 20 or 30 more paintings and drawings in it than that one.
Amazing.
So yeah,
it's brilliant. I bet you love it. Have you had some really good feedback, I guess, then from people as well? I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, it only opened a couple of weeks ago, and at the opening night, everyone was all the owners actually seeing their paintings lit in a proper gallery were quite taken,
delighted,
because you can never really recreate that it's very hard to recreate it in a domestic setting. So seeing them in a gallery, and they're hung. It was Melanie Gardner at Tullie House had the idea that we should maybe think not just chronologically, but actually put them into groupings. So there are farm scenes grouped together, snow scenes, planting and harvesting scenes, early works. And I think that definitely adds a lot of interest to when you're going round to see these. There's a small section on Yorkshire scenes. That's very good.
Nice.
So yeah, fantastic. And the whole exhibition is set off as you walk in. There's a charcoal drawing by Frank Auerbach of Sheila Fell from 1954, which captures her likeness. Her daughter says that no photograph has ever captured Sheila Fell in the way that drawing has. So that is right at the entrance to the exhibition, and it's a great addition.
That's amazing. I know that Frank Auerbach has done the didn't he do a forward for the book as well? Is that right? Was he involved in? Did he?
Yeah,
he did one for Kate Hayes' book, and he gave us a quote on Sheila Fell, which is in our book.
Yeah, that's nice, because obviously he passed away, didn't he, really recently as well?
Yes, just recently.
Yeah, that's probably it's probably one of the last things he ever sort of contributed towards as well, I would have thought. So that's I know a friend of mine has written a book on an artist called Ray Atkins, and I think Frank wrote as a small forward for that. I think that was published quite recently as well. So it's nice that he did that Frank. He sort of
it's very good.
all the way through his life. Even when he taught and did other things, he maintained a contact with students. I mean, I'm really good friends with an artist on Anglesey, a guy I absolutely love. I love his work, and he knew Frank all the way through from being a student, and they sort of they maintained regular contact all the way through, and he was very supportive. So yeah, it was obviously he loved Sheila's work, didn't he? He sort of thought a lot about it. But yeah, this exhibition is brilliant. And when's it on? When's it on till? How long's it on?
So it's on until the middle of March, and then on the 5th of April, it opens up in Sunderland at the Sunderland Museum and Winter Gardens, and it's on there for 3 months as well. So
plenty of time to see it. Yeah, I will come up and see it at some point. I'm not sure where, but I will come and see it. It's a few hours drive, but I bet it's longer for you though, isn't it? I mean, it must take you ages to get there.
Yes, Cambridge is a long way from anywhere like that. But
yeah.
the trip was well worth it, actually.
Is he not travelling down south then at all? Would it?
It would be great if it did, but sadly we haven't managed to fix that
Right.
up.
Right.
But
that's a
if
shame.
anybody, wants to put on a show, that would be
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I
wonderful.
mean, it's nice to do anything, and with the book out as well. It's a sort of, because
Yeah.
then obviously,
Yes,
like you say,
yes.
it's out middle of June. Then so it's the show will be on,
Yeah.
and,
Yes.
and then the book will come out sort of afterwards. Then yeah,
It's probably come out while the show's in Sunderland,
while the
actually.
show's in Sunderland.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
no, it's brilliant. It's really, really great, and it's nice to learn a bit more about Sheila's, life and work, and this will obviously go out there into the world as well, and people can listen in and learn more about her and buy the book. And but thank you very much for doing it. It's been really great, and
No, thank you, Van. That's really good.
no
Pleasure.
problem. And
Thank you.
all the best, and I shall speak to you soon. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Okay.
Okay, thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Ant.
Bye.
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 The Sheila Fell exhibition, which is the largest ever, is on at Tullie House until middle of March 2025, and then it moves up to Sunderland Museum until June 2025. And just to dedicate this episode to the memory of the painter John McCombs, who sadly passed away recently. John was a Saddleworth artist, and he was a wonderful painter, so I just wanted to mention him here. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. As usual, I'll post some images relating to the episode on the Northern Art Facebook page and on the Instagram page too. Any likes, comments, shares, messages, follows, anything like that is very much appreciated. You can also subscribe to the channel on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts, and then you won't miss out on any episodes I upload in the future.